For Michael, it was just another evening, a quiet, uneventful night as he waited for his younger brother, Jordan, to finish soccer practice. Sitting under a tall oak tree, flipping through a book, he had no idea that in just a few moments, his world would shift in a way he never expected. The low rumble of motorcycles broke through the calm of the park, growing louder with each second. At first, it seemed like just another group passing by, but then the bike stopped. 5 men, clad in leather jackets, parked near the soccer field and scanned the area like predators searching for prey. Their eyes locked onto Michael. Why him? What did they want? Michael felt an uneasy tension rising in his chest. Something told him this was no ordinary encounter. Tonight, his courage and years of discipline were about to face the ultimate test. The park buzzed with life. Teens glued to their phones, parents deep in conversation, and kids chasing a soccer ball on the field. 16-year-old Michael sat apart from the crowd, leaning against a towering oak tree, dressed in a sharp black suit with a crisp white shirt and polished shoes. He was an unusual sight in the middle of the park. A worn book rested in his hands. Though he barely read it, his thoughts drifting while waiting for his younger brother, Jordan, to wrap up soccer practice. Everything about the evening felt normal, peaceful, but peace rarely lasts. The distant rumble of motorcycles shattered the calm, cutting through the chatter and laughter like a knife. At first, Michael didn't pay much attention. Motorcycles were common, right? But these weren't just passing by. The engines grew louder, and soon, 5 bikers rolled into the park, their leather jackets and dark jeans stark against the wholesome scene of families and children. They didn't belong here, and they didn't act like it either. They stopped near the soccer field, their eyes scanning the park. Michael noticed them out of the corner of his eye. For a moment, he thought nothing of it, until all 5 sets of eyes locked onto him. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He looked away, pretending to focus on his book, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. And then it happened. The largest of the group, a burly man with a shaved head and a menacing smirk, motioned to his friends. Gravel crunched under heavy boots as they strode toward him, their expressions unreadable but deliberate. "What are you doing here, kid?" the burly man asked, his voice rough like gravel. Michael hesitated, keeping his tone polite but steady. "Waiting for my brother," he replied, closing his book and meeting the man's stare. The man smirked, exchanging a look with his companions. "Doesn't seem like your kind of place," he said, his words cutting. Michael's grip on the book tightened slightly, but he kept his composure. "It's a public park," he said simply, his voice even. The man's smirk faded, his eyes narrowing. "Got a smart mouth, huh?" he said, stepping closer. The other bikers spread out around him, creating a semicircle, trapping him under the shade of the oak tree. The rest of the park carried on as if nothing was happening. Parents, kids, and teens oblivious to the brewing storm just a few feet away. Michael's pulse quickened, but his face remained calm. Years of karate training had taught him to keep a level head in moments like this. Observe, think, act only if necessary. "I don't want any trouble," Michael said firmly, his tone measured but confident. The burly man leaned closer, his face inches away. "Trouble?" he said, his voice low and taunting. "Who said anything about trouble?" Michael stayed seated, his hands resting loosely on his knees. But his mind raced. These men weren't here for small talk, and he knew it. Tonight, his patience, his composure, and his skills were about to be tested. The tension thickened under the oak tree as the bikers closed in. Michael stayed calm, his hands still on his knees, but their taunts grew louder. "Maybe you should show us what you've got," the burly leader sneered, his friends chuckling darkly. Michael's silence only fueled their bravado. "What's the matter, kid?" Scared, the leader mocked, leaning closer. Before Michael could respond, a voice rang out, "Leave him alone!" Michael's chest tightened as he turned to see Jordan, his 10-year-old brother, standing a few yards away, sweat still on his face from soccer practice. "Jordan, stay back," Michael ordered, his voice sharp and protective. The bikers turned their attention to the boy, grinning wickedly. "This your brother?" one of them jeered. "Maybe we should teach you both a lesson." Michael's pulse quickened, not with fear but with resolve. Slowly he rose, his movements deliberate and calm, his eyes hard as steel, locked onto the group as he adjusted his stance, a stance drilled into him through years of martial arts training. "Don't touch him," Michael said, his voice quiet but cutting through the air like a blade. The leader smirked. "And what are you going to do about it?" Michael's gaze didn't waver. "Walk away. Now." The leader laughed, stepping forward to shove him. But as his hand lunged, Michael moved like lightning. He sidestepped, striking the man's wrist and twisting it sharply. The leader stumbled back, grunting in pain. "Big mistake," the leader growled, signaling the others. The first biker swung wildly, but Michael ducked with ease, countering with a sharp kick to the man's knee. He crumpled instantly. The second hesitated for a split second, but it was enough. Michael pivoted and delivered a spinning kick to his ribs, sending him sprawling. The leader charged again, swinging with brute force, but Michael danced around his blows, striking with precision and grace. A sharp palm strike to the solar plexus left the leader gasping for air, staggering backward. By now, a small crowd had gathered, their eyes wide. Someone held up a phone, recording every second. The leader, red-faced and seething, lunged one final time, trying to grab Michael's jacket. But Michael stepped aside effortlessly, delivering a final, measured strike that left the man doubled over. "Enough," Michael said firmly, his voice ringing through the park. "I don't want to hurt you. Leave. Now." The bikers exchanged glances, their confidence shattered. The leader, wheezing and clutching his side, glared at Michael before growling, "Let's go." As they limped to their bikes, the leader threw one last glare over his shoulder. "This ain't over, kid," he spat, revving his engine before roaring off with his crew. Michael didn't flinch, standing tall until the sound of their motorcycles faded into the night. As the roar of the motorcycles faded, the crowd began to murmur. Then a ripple of applause broke through, spreading across the park. Parents, kids, even soccer players clapped and whispered in admiration and disbelief. Jordan ran up to Michael, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. "Michael, are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. Michael knelt down, placing a reassuring hand on his little brother's shoulder. "I'm fine," he said, offering a small smile. "Let's go home." As they walked away, Michael felt the weight of the day settling in. His thoughts raced, replaying the confrontation in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. The walk home was quiet, their sneakers tapping softly against the pavement. Jordan kept sneaking glances at his older brother, his expression full of questions he didn't know how to ask. Finally, Jordan broke the silence. "Michael," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "how did you do all that? I mean, they were huge, and there were 3 of them." Michael chuckled softly, shaking his head. "It's not about being bigger, Jordan," he explained. "It's about being prepared, staying calm, and knowing when to act." Jordan frowned. "But what if they come back? That guy said it wasn't over." Michael stopped walking and turned to face his brother. "If they do, we'll handle it," he said firmly. Then his tone softened. "But listen to me, Jordan. What happened today wasn't about fighting. It was about standing up for myself. And for you. Violence should never be the first answer. It's the last resort." Jordan nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a mix of understanding and uncertainty. When they reached home, their mom was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed and concern etched on her face. "You're late," she said, her voice tinged with worry. Michael hesitated, glancing at Jordan, who stayed silent. "Something happened at the park," Michael admitted. He chose his words carefully, not wanting to alarm her more than necessary. As he recounted the story, her expression shifted from fear to pride. She listened intently, Her lips pressed into a thin line, but her eyes glistened with emotion. "Michael," she said when he finished, her voice steady but full of warmth, "I'm proud of you for protecting your brother and yourself. But promise me one thing. Don't ever take risks like that unless you have no other choice." "I promise," Michael replied, and he meant it. That night, as Michael lay in bed, the day's events replayed in his mind. He thought about the biker's aggression, the crowd's reaction, and the leader's parting words. This ain't over, kid. But Michael wasn't afraid. He had learned long ago that fear only had power if you let it. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of purpose. The world wasn't always fair, but moments like today proved that courage and discipline could make a difference. Deep down, Michael knew this wasn't just a test of his skills. It was a reminder, a lesson in standing up for what's right, no matter how daunting the challenge.